Well, there he is. Great to see you all here. And yeah, the title of the talk, The Global Race for Fusion Power, is on. And this is really what's happening. So I'll need to tell you what fusion power is. And also we are going to talk about what the TUE is contributing to it. And actually the TUE has a pretty unique contribution to make. And it'll be up to you to make that contribution. There we go, nuclear fusion, fusion energy, fusion power. As Lucas just said, it powers the sun, it powers the stars, and it's been difficult to reproduce that on Earth. This is the process that we are trying to do. You take light atoms, the atom nuclei, and you put them together. It's a high threshold energy, but when it happens, you get a lot of energy out. An awful lot of energy, so you need very little fuel. Fuel is not the issue. The process is difficult to achieve, though. Now, may I ask you, if you think nuclear fusion, what is the first word or thought or emotion that comes up in your mind? Can I just kick this into the audience? Can I see hands, perhaps? That gives me a direction. We start here.
The first word that comes to mind for me is ITER.
ITER. That's a nice word, yes. And we're going to talk about ITER. There was a person behind you, and then let's just... Oh, usually there are also nice contributions from the rear of the hall, so...
Difficult.
Yeah. Difficult, yes, great.
Hands?
I can shout.
Yeah, shout is also good.
Plasma.
Plasma, okay. Okay, anything else?
20 years away for the past 60 years.
20 years, okay, now we're talking. Anything along those lines? Confinement, okay. Anything else? Okay, well, all the words that you just mentioned will come up in my talk, so we are covered there. But we are kind of starting with the 20 years ahead. Well, actually, when I started in this field, the joke was it's always 50 years ahead, so we're doing good. 20 years would be okay, actually. But let us see. What's happening here? Well, does this work? Yes. Why is it such a super exciting time? I can say, so I've been in this field for 42.5 years or so. It's never been as exciting as it is today. So why is that? Well, of course, there have been scientific breakthroughs. Well, breakthrough steps ahead, big steps ahead. So there were records set. This is of 2 years ago, but then okay, lots of press releases there. Then America came back, so this is the European experiment. I'm going to tell you what it is, but let's just say they make records. Then America said, oh, but we also achieved a breakthrough. And somebody else says, well, it's not a real breakthrough. So they came back a year later and said, oh, now we really have a breakthrough. And actually, in the meantime, China, and if you like, Japan and Korea, they also had big steps ahead. So scientifically, there are big steps ahead, but is this bringing us very close to a practical energy source? Oh, I forgot almost the most important ones. A month ago, or 2 months ago, there was even a better record. Well, records are always better than the previous record, but okay. Achieved in the European experiment in England. But what is so special is that somehow, with all these steps ahead, there's been, let's say, the confidence, the trust, the feeling among also investors that now is the time that we know enough to start building productive fusion power plants. Of course, we never had a demonstrator of those, but the feeling now is, okay, well, maybe we can do it. So the funding, serious money, says Bloomberg, serious money. I talked to one of the owners of one of the startups, and he said, okay, we are trying to do this. We asked for private investments, and I asked him, so you're talking to millionaires? No, he said, I'm not talking to millionaires. We talk to billionaires, because millionaires want to see a return on investment. Billionaires have this grand vision of contributing something to mankind. So serious money, yeah, these startups, we'll come to talk about it, but they get serious money. the total number of private fusion companies has certainly taken off. So in the past few years, it's gone from, 15 or so. I think this is even 2 years back, and in the meantime, I think it's well over 50, probably well over 60. And they're all backed with this serious money. So let us have a look at those investments. Yeah. Oh, there's a company, Helion, and it secures 2.2 billion. Okay, that's not bad for a startup. 2 billion. If you are thinking about starting a startup, you probably think, well, maybe it would be nice if we can get 500,000, or maybe 10 million if you're very adventurous. This startup gets 2.2 billion. And here's another one. They got 500 million to build up a fusion, let's say, power plant. And here's another one. This is an MIT startup. It's called Commonwealth Fusion Systems, started by a good friend of mine. And we come to speak about it. But they picked up more than 2 billion in a few years. It's been the most successful startup in the United States for the past couple of years. Then there's more. They do magnets. But also in Europe, we now have startups. There's something called Renaissance Fusion. I was talking to the boss of Renaissance Fusion just 4 years ago or so. He came to my office and he explained what he wanted to do. I thought, well, this is never going to work. Yeah, another friend of mine who actually invests in this stuff, he said, should I invest in Renaissance Fusion? I said, don't think so. He said, well, I do it anyway. And in the meantime, they picked up, this was 16 million, and they have had much more in the meantime. And I learned from that if someone comes with a, wild idea, where you think as a scientist, well, not so sure this is going to work. If you give them money and they put a smart team together, you can be surprised at what comes out. Another very important one in Europe is this one, Gauss fusion, because they are not scientists with a smart idea. They're industries, a bunch of industries from different countries in Europe that said, in the end, it's not scientists, it's industries that are going to build these fusion power plants. So we team up. Then we talk to the scientists and say, okay, you give us the blueprints, we build it. An entirely different approach. They also are doing very well. And even in the Netherlands, this is a startup. It sells software. It came out of fusion programming efforts, started by a PhD student from our group, Daan van Vught. He's doing very well. He has a whole team now. And as you can probably see, the inspiration for his company really is fusion. And here's another one, also a student from our team, who then said, I want to develop heat pipes, so a heat transfer technology for fusion. And he has started the company, and he's also doing very well. Now, what is typical here is that we have these 50 or so companies, and they're all doing something different. They all have their own approach. Now, if you compare that to the government programs, they all do the same thing together. So, okay, they probably picked the best option, but there is something to say for diversity. Hello? Yes. So all of them, of course, say, well, we'll be much smarter and sooner and faster and smaller than the big machines that come out of the government programs. Some come with an improved concept that looks very much like, let's say, a government program, like ITER, if you like. And others come with completely out-of-the-box ideas, and they get a lot of money. Now, if you ask me, as just said, for each of those, if you ask me what's the chance of success, the probability of success, I say, maybe not so good. But if it's 20% for all of them and you have 20 of those, then the probability that at least one of them will succeed is already pretty big. And what's more important, because they're trying out all these different concepts, and there's cross-fertilization, the whole atmosphere around fusion has become so much more creative, and there's so much more drive and excitement and enthusiasm. It attracts people from all over the world. Actually, people are being bought away from universities. This could be a problem. To join those teams where they move really fast. Yeah. Now, about 2 years ago, this started to happen. Big money flowed towards these startup companies. And in the beginning, the government lab said, don't believe them, they're flying carpet sellers, they're snake oil sellers. I learned a lot of English words that I hadn't in my vocabulary before, by which these companies were indicated. But then suddenly the big labs realized, if you can't beat them. So now they want to work together. And the governments have said, okay, now we want to take back the initiative or do it together. So at COP28 on the 5th of December last year, John Kerry, I mean, that's not the least of podia, of places to speak out. John Kerry said, we, the US, want to lead the world in developing nuclear fusion energy. And China said, oh, hang on, that was our ambition. So they also wanted to lead the world in nuclear fusion. Oh, and then says, oh, China actually is doing very well there. They joined quite late so only 20 years ago, say, but they're doing very well. And then the UK government said, oh, but we really were the thought leaders in this field. And they also pledged a lot of money to make a big step. And then, for instance, Germany said, hang on, but we were actually leading in fusion. And they kind of doubled their fusion budget. And they also spend it to work together with companies. So there's a whole lot of new German startups that are co-funded by the government. Yeah, so that is all very exciting. And if you're joining this field, I'm going to invite you later on to do that. It is just a super exciting time. Now let's go back, step back a bit and say, okay, but why did we want to do that? Well, you're all totally familiar with the energy transition, of course, and the need for it. And it's really your generation, speaking to people behind the first row, that is, that is going to have to deal with it. I still want to give you an image that brings home this message. So this is a lot of years, as you can see, and this is the world population. It developed, it was very low. It was, let's say, order 1 billion or so 100 years ago, while just picking up. And we expect it to level off at about 10 billion. And here is the energy use. And you say, okay, well, that's logical, because not only did we get more people, also each of us is using more energy, so good. And how do we make it? Well, with fossil fuel. Yeah. But we also know that between now and 2050, so that's between here and here, we have to stop using the fossil fuel. So that is an incredibly steep edge. The rise was already steep. And the world now is a very different world from 50 years ago. But from here to 2050, we have to get rid of the fossil fuel. Now, I said it's logical that the energies rose faster than the population, because each of us is also increasing their energy use, if not in this part of the world, then at least in the parts of the world that are using very little at the moment. But you can also reverse that story. You can also say this rise in population has been made possible because we accessed all that fossil energy. And we use it to heat homes or to cool homes in many places of the world, to produce food for the transportation. And we really need it to sustain our, well, not only our let's say, way of life, but really our life. We also you need to build houses. 9% of the energy use is for concrete, and 7% or so is for melting steel. So using much less is going to hurt. Now, if we don't do anything, I'm afraid that the population will follow the fossil fuel curve. This you don't want to happen, especially the new generation. So we have to fill that gap. But you see here how dramatic that is. I have a few numbers for you that capture the energy transition challenge. If you remember 15 out of 16, you're doing good. 20 terawatts is how much energy we use. Oops, I should stay a little closer. Okay. The global energy market is about $10 trillion per year. That is about 10% of the global GDP. So energy really is a very important thing. It's not a small market, it's the single largest market. A kilowatt hour of power, of energy, to be precise, generates about $1 of GDP. Or to generate it costs a few cents. So there's an enormous margin between generating it and the profit, if you like, for society. So it really doesn't matter. As we have seen, if you raise the gas price, nothing much happens. There's still an enormous margin. Yeah, well, if you make it 5 or 10 times more expensive, like happened in 2022, then you start to notice. Yeah, then the government will have to subsidize because it becomes really too expensive for society. This you may never have realized, but a barrel of oil costs about $100. The energy equivalent of that is 20,000 person hours work. So now you think, oh, okay. We are not going to go without that kind of exchange rate. 26 years left to realize the energy transition. The energy mix, about 20% of the total energy end use is electricity. Solar and wind make electricity. At the moment, they are only 1.5% of the total energy use. Larger fraction, of course, of electricity. Fission is about 4% at the moment of total energy use. There are about 430 fission power plants. The fission industry is capable of building about 5 to 10. If we wanted to solve the energy transition with a lot more fission, we would need to tenfold this number or so. The same, of course, PV and wind have been growing very fast over the past decades. They still need to grow a lot. And now here's an interesting number. So that fission industry in the world, well, in the US, employs about 500,000 people. In the world, about 2 million. Okay. And it's still small. So now you get an idea of how big this energy market is. Yes. Some simple calculations. To install a new energy generating technology, whether it's wind or solar or fission, they all cost about $5 per watt. That is real watts. I mean, a solar panel now costs about 50 cents probably per watt on the name tag, but they don't work in the night and they don't work in the winter. So that works out as about $5. And it's a pretty universal number. It doesn't include the network, storage, things like that. So to install, just to replace the existing energy infrastructure with renewables or fission or whatever, costs about You can work out how much it costs, and then you have 30 years to do it, or 26 years to do it. It costs about 3 trillion a year. That is 3% of the GDP. So, comparable to defense or so. And it's what we need to do to make the energy transition happen. Over the past decade or so, wind and solar got about 300 billion, so that's 1/10 of what is needed. Okay. The market that has been estimated for nuclear fusion industry is about $40 trillion. That is a huge market, and that would correspond to a workforce in the nuclear fusion industry of more than 100 million people. Okay. Who is going to train these people? Well, maybe a few of those 100 million are in the room today. Fusion power. Now, I'm going to go through a few pictures very quickly. So the ITER machine is, it looks like this. It's a collaboration of 7 countries. Several of those are either at war with each other or have very bad relationships. But they still work together on this experiment. It's been called a peace project. And maybe it will also make energy. So why do all these countries want fusion? You probably know the answer, because it doesn't emit CO2, obviously. It's super safe, I can vouch for that. And it could provide energy autonomy. You need very little fuel and very little stuff. It's just very difficult to do. So it's all fine, except you can't do it. Now, if you say that to an engineer, they'll probably say, now I start to be interested. So what are those challenges then? Very briefly, if this is the machine, and so what you see there is a machine that has very big magnets and a vacuum vessel in the middle and has a donut shape, and in there is the fuel, which is very hot. It needs to be about 100 million degrees, 150 million degrees, and therefore it is a plasma. So someone said plasma, it's there too. Yeah. So we had to learn about the physics of super hot gases. We had to learn about keeping them away from the outside world, which we do with magnets. There are all other methods too, but we do it with magnets mostly. Then if you have a gas confined with magnets and you heat it up, you generate gigawatts inside there. It's going to be turbulent. The turbulence is going to carry out the heat at a fast rate, so you have to suppress the turbulence. We had to learn how to do that. If you succeed in doing that, you have a super compact energy source sitting there in your vacuum vessel. That heat is going to go somewhere, namely to the wall in the end. So you need a wall that can handle that heat. It shouldn't melt, shouldn't evaporate. Part of the energy is released, large part of the energy, in fact, is released in the form of fast neutrons. They'll hit the materials that don't like to be hit by neutrons. So you need neutron-hard materials. Then there's an issue that is entirely unresolved at the moment. But the neutrons will have to react, nuclear reaction, with lithium somewhere in the wall to produce a new tritium. You remember from the picture that tritium is the real fuel inside the reactor. So, okay, fuel cycle. And then we proudly say that these machines are the most complex devices ever built by mankind. ASML says that too, by the way. So it's either the ASML machine or the fusion reactor. But yeah, that comes with a lot of questions about how can you make something that's reliable if it's so complex. It's much more difficult than you think. Okay, the high temperature plasma physics we've done, magnetic confinement we can do, the turbulence control we can do, heat resistant materials, we are working on those, neutron hard materials, we are working on those, not the most urgent issue. The fuel cycle, more urgent I'd say, we're working on that at complex systems. In fact, Eindhoven, we work on control of complex systems, we work on the design of complex systems, we work on the fuel cycle, We don't work so much on neutron hard materials. We do a lot of work on heat-resistant materials, though. So if you're afraid that the wall will melt because of the high heat load, what is the trick to get rid of that problem? Use a wall that is already melted. We make walls out of molten liquid metals, and they can flow, and you can cool them elsewhere. So we're working on that in Eindhoven. This is the ITER site. Big building. We're going inside here, and you see this really is big science. These are average persons, but there is a small part of the machine, and you can see it's really big. If you step in there, I see here students that have been there. Can you confirm that it's impressive if you step in that room? Yes. Yes, it's a life-changing experience. You feel, let's say, much smaller afterwards. Here's again parts of those of the machine, and that goes into a building. So that it's a huge building, and then the actual machine is in a pit that goes underground. Again, very large, and here it's a bit like a cathedral. If those pictures didn't impress you, if to carry those parts around, they constructed the truck with 352 wheels, and it looks like this. It happens in the night because it's a bit of a problem for the rest of the traffic. Progress has been very fast in fusion, well, until 2000. And then we said, okay, we need to build ITER now, and that took much longer than planned. So ITER was, according to this extrapolation, should have happened in about 2003 or so. There we go. And then we couldn't agree on where to build it, how to build it. It was more difficult than thought, so there we go. The official timeline, the roadmap, looks like this. And it has ITER and it has demo. And if you look at the dates, you'd say, oh, okay, we'll have full performance in ITER in 2040, and then maybe we start building demo in 2045. So that is a real reactor, but still a demonstrator, but it produces lots of power. And maybe it's operational 2060 or so. And if that is happening, you say, okay, no electricity in 2050. So now we come back to fusion always 20 years from now. Well, it's more than that. It's more like 50 years from now. And that was, at some point, the spark that made people say, well, we know so much, we can go much faster if we don't do this in government laboratories, if we do this in startups. So, there we go, startups. I showed you this. Here, the Commonwealth Fusion Systems, they said, with modern materials, with high temperature superconductors, we can make magnets that are twice as strong, which gives us 2 to the power 4 times, so 16 times higher energy density. We can make much smaller reactors. So they have something called Spark. They're building that at a minute. It'll be ready in about 2 years from now. It has the same specs as ITER. And you see, it's just a little bit bigger than a person. Oh, and then they'll follow that up with something called ARC. It's somewhat bigger, but this is the same performance as demo. Much smaller, much more compact. Here is another one that also has plasmas, but then you have pistons, and the plasma is enrobed in a layer of liquid lead, or liquid lithium, in fact. It used to be lead, now it's lithium. And the pistons give a pressure wave that pushes the plasma together to heat it further up. It's called general fusion. Here's another one, just to show you the diversity of approaches. They say, well, if we put a little bit of the fuel in this matrix, and we program the matrix in such a way, they won't say how, that a shock wave that we make by shooting a bullet at it will concentrate. We can compress that little bit of fuel, make it hot, and create ignition. All super interesting. Those, for instance, if you compare the Spark Arc roadmap to that of Demo and ITER, it's like 5 times faster. There we go. So why can it go so much faster? Well, if you look at what we need to do, so this is a spider diagram, and there are technologies that need to be developed with TRLs and so. So TRL 1, technology readiness level, is in the center, and then fully ready is at the edge. And you have performance, so it should do what it promises to do, and then its operation, it should also do that for, not for a day, but for a year. And if it does that, you say, oh, but maybe actually it should do that for 50 years, which is yet another challenge. Then the government programs try to make a machine that does everything, gets it all right in the first machine. And the startups typically say, well, let's first get the performance, then build it from 1 day to a week to a year. And because they go much faster through their cycles, they don't have to solve all the problems in their first machine. In the end, we need about 10,000 fusion power plants, so the first one doesn't have to be the perfect one. I'm about to close, so finally, what happens at Eindhoven? Well, we have Eindhoven University, and there are many departments actually involved in the fusion research and education. And we have the DIFFER Institute, which is the National Center for Fusion Research. And it combines a lot of different disciplines. And we have an honors track. I see there are quite a few of our honors students here. They tackle all the non-technological roadmaps. But if you are interested, if you wanted to join this field at this super exciting time, we have a master's program. We have had it for about 10 years. It's almost unique in the world. It is pretty unique in the Netherlands. It is probably the best and certainly the largest in Europe. Our students do projects all over the world in startups as well as the government labs, really all over the world. And we have a Fusion Experience Day. If you are interested, you want to know more about it, if you consider signing up for this program in September, so before September, starting in September, you can have more information by clicking on that QR code, which, yes, all bring out your telephones and see. Can someone confirm that it works? Because it's quite a distance. Or you can drop me an email, or you can come to me after the talk.
Thank you very much, Niek Lopes Cardozo. A big round of applause.